Well, thank you very much for inviting me here. I will not reveal until, I think, the 19th slide why I'm so happy to be here. First of all, let me correct something, because if you look at my badge and if you look at the list of participants, you see that my first name is misspelled. Here's with W instead of V. V is the correct spelling. Must be an OCR error made by the organizer. And I suppose, I have to assume that they did not use Abby, because otherwise it would never have happened, this mistake. Now, I'll tell you something. Well, very brief overview, Clarion in a nutshell. I'll give you some examples of things we want to be able to do, goals, vision. I'll show you some important features. I'll tell you about the phasing of the project and the structure and the shape as we see it, some essential ingredients and who are in and who are missing in Clarion, and then I'll say something about the libraries and then some final words to conclude. This is not going to be a technical presentation, it's just so you can lean back and just relax, because it's all very easy and light, but it's about a thing that I think can be very important for all of us. Now, what is Clarion? Well, Clarion stands for the Common Language, Resource and Technology Infrastructure, and you can find everything on our website, clarion.eu. And the basic idea is very simple. We want to create a European federation of digital repositories that contain language-based material or language-based tools. And this language can take any shape. I mean, it could be text, could be speech, audio, video, sign language, or whatever. I mean, everything that can be called language. And we want to, through this infrastructure, this federation, want to provide access to both data and also to advanced language and speech technology tools by means of web service, so that users can not only retrieve things, but can only manipulate, enhance, exploit, and explore the data. So it's really just more than just retrieval of relevant documents. And we want to provide uniform single sign-on access, so that once you're connected to Clarion, you can dig up your documents and you can make use of service wherever they are by just logging in once, so that you don't have to log in on 15 separate sites if you have to do something complicated. We have a very specific target audience. That's the social sciences and humanities scholars. So it's in a way it's very limited. But of course we would not stop others from using it. But we are focused on this specific group, and we want to cover all EU and associated countries. And of course we're also looking across the ocean. But for now we want to cover all the EU and associated countries. And for us, all languages that are relevant for our target audience are relevant. So we don't make a distinction between big language, small language, commercially interesting languages and minority languages, as is very often done in the European Commission's language technology programs, where they have a strong focus on what's commercially relevant. We don't care about commercial relevance. Every language is equally dear to us, as long as it's relevant for the community. Now, what are the sort of things we have in mind? Well, here I give some very wild examples of the sort of things that we would like our users to be able to ask to the infrastructure. Well, these are just a few wild examples. Give me all digital copies of all contemporary documents in European archives that discuss the Great Plague, or give me all negative articles about Islam or about soccer in Slovenski Narod daily newspaper, which existed, I checked it on the web, from 1868 to 1943. I have no idea what Narod means, but Slovenski I recognize. Find TV news interviews that involve German speakers with a Dutch accent. Summarize all articles in European newspapers of August 2010 about OCR, and do it in Spanish, summary. And show me the pronoun systems in the languages of Nepal. Well, this is just to illustrate how broad the variety of things is that we like our users to be able to ask. All this sounds very ambitious, but if you look at the examples, you will see that for all these examples I mentioned here, in some cases, embryonic technology exists. So they are not just wild dreams. These things are feasible, maybe not perfect, but well, even OCR is not perfect yet. But these things can be approached, and I'm sure that, because this is a long-term thing, in maybe 3 or 5 years' time, many of these things can be done a lot better than they can be done now. And we have to be forward-looking. We have to look at the future. Now, why this focus on language? Well, basically, I think that language is a very important factor in many disciplines in the humanities and social sciences. Language is very central. I'll just mention a few examples. I mean, it's an object of study. It's a means of human communication. means of human expression, part of one's cultural identity, it's carrier of knowledge and information, and many more roles that language plays, and we want to address all these roles. And again, that makes our endeavor very, very ambitious. And I realize that, but if you're not ambitious, you don't have the right to exist, I think. Now, so we want this infrastructure to give access to digital data and advanced language processing tools. We think that this will move the social science and humanities more towards an e-science paradigm, because, well, there are lots of old traditions in these areas, but I think it gradually, also the humanities social sciences, I abbreviate it HSS, they have to adopt the modern technology and the modern methods. I do not think that we should try to transform, let's say, existing scholars of, let's say, elderly scholars of my age to become technology experts. I mean, I think that's, first of all, it's really wasted on these people because they are the lost generation. I think we have to invest in the future generation. That's what we have to think about. So we should not, basically not think about ourselves, but if you're in a university, about the people you're educating right now. And if you look at the current picture, I mean, there are lots and lots of digital collections, I mean, and that are even accessible, but they are in many, very many different places and spread all over Europe. And very often, it's hard to find them. It's very hard to find anything. For example, if I had to find documents about the place where I was born in the Netherlands, Hilversum, very nice village, I wouldn't know where to go. I would probably go to the local archive, but for the rest, I had no idea where I would have to go to, well, to the National Archive, to the National Library, to University Library. I don't know. And that's something that we want to address. We want to make it easy to find whatever material there is for the scholar. And we also think that, we also see that if there are interesting data sets and tools, they very often don't work together. Of course, my tools work with my data, but will my tools also work on your data? Or will it still work if we use your data, combine it with one tool of mine and one tool of yours? And so if we want to make the workflows that have been addressed already in earlier presentations, if we want to make them fit together, a lot of work has to be done because everybody is using his own conventions, his own standards, and that's something we have to work on. And we want to make this access to these data and tools sustainable. And the access should be right from the researcher's desk. The researcher should, of course, if he wants to travel to an archive, no one should stop him from doing that. But he should be able to do it from where the place where he or she is sitting. And that's, according to us, that's our belief, and we may have gotten it wrong, the way to go ahead. Now, some important features, first some negative features, because many people have misconceptions about what Clarin is. Clarin is not about creating new institutions or installations, but we want to build on what exists, because there is already so much that exists, both in terms of data and tools, but also in terms of organizations, centers that distribute and these materials and make them available. So there's no reason for us to build entirely new things, to waste our money on that. We are not focused as a Clarin community on the creation of technology and the creation of digital data. We want to integrate in this whole infrastructure whatever is there. But of course, if we would just focus on this, let's say this infrastructure in which things can be integrated, and if there's no content, there's no reason for Clarin to exist. So the content is essential, it should be there, but Clarin is not responsible for the creation of content. Will not claim money for the creation of content. Clarin will not own the data and tools that they want to give access to. They will just provide access because all the material remains in the owner's ownership. We are not oriented towards commercial markets. And as I said earlier on, we want to serve the humanities, social sciences scholars. And a very important feature is Clarin is not a project, but it should become a sustainable facility for the research community. Because projects, they come and go. You can work for 5 years together and enjoy it very much, and after 5 years, the whole thing collapses, and then everything dissipates, and that's, I think, a very bad characteristic. Now, some positive important features. We, as I said earlier on, we want to make it possible to find data. If they exist, they should be findable through Clarin. That's our ambition. We want to have the single sign-on access. It's like if those of you who are using EduRoam realize what it means that if you can go to a university in another European country, you just switch on your laptop and you connect it to the internet, to your own environment, etc. That's the sort of thing we want to offer to our users as well. We want to give access to data and to workflows, and so that people can perform very complex linguistic operations. I think to some extent, one of my dreams, maybe a bit too naive, is thinking in terms of some sort of Lego bricks, where you have interesting services that can be, from simple Lego bricks you can build castles, cars, space shuttles and that sort of things. And that's the sort of thing we have in mind for Clarion. Just provide simple things, make them interconnectable, and build complex workflows on the basis of that. And of course, in our vision, these workflows all start from some sort of text or language representation. But after what I've heard yesterday and today, I think we could easily start the workflow not from, let's say, the thing that's already text, but from the image, from the image, and then send it through OCR flow, and then send it through more complex linguistic operations. So I think that there's a very interesting basis for collaboration here. We want to serve both expert users and non-expert users, because they may have totally different wishes and expectations, and we should take that into account. And we want to cover both historical and contemporary language-based material in all modalities. And if you look at historical material, most of it will be, well, written text. But if you look at the future, I think that text may not be the most important modality of the future. And if you look at the future, let's say, digital documents, they may be audio recordings, video recordings, or even more complex things than that. And we want to provide access to both the linguistic data, let's say the language, the form, but also to the content. And as I said earlier on, all languages are equally important for us. Now, does Clarion exist? The answer is yes and no. Because Clarion came into existence in, I think in 2006 and 2007, when we prepared a proposal for the so-called S3 roadmap. There was let's say, call for proposals launched by the European Commission in order to identify and, let's say, try to bootstrap essential research infrastructures for Europe's future. We got a grant for the European Commission of 4.1 million, and we spent it on this project. And the idea of this project was simply to design, both from a technical point of view and from an organizational, financial point of view, the future Clarion infrastructure, and try to line up the players so that after this project, we will be ready to embark on the real Clarion. And now the project ended, this summer, and now we have embarked on the next phase, the construction phase. Now we have to start building the Clarion infrastructure, and we've given ourselves 2 years for that. Although, personally, I believe that users shouldn't have to wait until 2013 to make use of the first services offered by Clarion, because we can do that earlier. I think after the first year, we should already be able to offer some initial basic services, maybe not with full coverage, but some services that people could play with and could experiment with. And then from that then on, it should be gradually evolve. And it should, of course, keep evolving, because in this area, you cannot, it's very different from when you're building big particle accelerators. You take 5 years to build it, and then you use it for 10 years, and then it's torn down and you build something else. Here, will be a continuous evolution, because the technology around us changes every year. I'm sure that all sorts of things that we are discussing right now internally about how to shape Clarion technically will sound ridiculous in 3 years' time, when we've been overtaken by technological development. So we should expect that this whole Clarion will remain in a continuous state of evolution. But after 2013, we hope to have reached a stable situation where we can say, well, now the exploitation phase has started. And the funding, many people think that the European Commission will be funding the construction phase and exploitation phase, but the answer is no. The Commission has said from the beginning, we will only pay for this preparatory phase project. For the rest, it's up to the countries to fund the creation and the exploitation of the infrastructure. So that's a very important factor. Of course, we still hope to be able to get some money from the Commission, but it's not there. They've never promised us anything. Now, the structure of Clarin, because I hope that you imagine, if we want to build on existing things, it has to be a rather complex animal in the sense that there are many parties involved and many financial streams. So we see Clarin as an animal with three different levels. One is the governance level, and for the governance we have chosen to set up a Clarin ERIC. Clarin ERIC is a legal entity, new type of legal entity, international legal entity created by the European Commission, and it's a consortium of governments, not a consortium, not an ordinary project consortium where you find universities or libraries. It's a consortium of governments, and they will be responsible for the overall coordination and governance of Clarin. Of course, people in ministries who are represented there, they govern, they don't work. So for the operational activities, you really need to resort to people who are prepared to make their hands dirty, who are working in the centers at the national level and who make this whole infrastructure work. And so we see two operational levels. So that's where we find the universities, etc. And that's the infrastructure level, where you find the centers who ensure the interconnection between all the services and data collections across Europe. And below that, we see in every country a national consortium that's responsible for the creation of data and tools, but compliant with the Clarin requirements. And these both operational levels will be entirely funded by the national governments. Now, as I said, the Clarin ERIC is a new sort of legal entity. It's a consortium of countries. It will govern and coordinate. The money for this Clarin ERIC, because they need some money, it's not a big annual budget, but they need money that's paid by the participating countries. They have to pay a membership fee. And each country has to promise that they will set up a national consortium, fund the national consortium for activities that are relevant to Clarin. And how exactly the countries want to do that, how they want to let's say, organize their national Clarin activities is entirely up to them. The thing that's important for us is that they commit themselves to doing something, to making the material they produce available through the Clarin infrastructure, and that they ensure that the operations fit together across all the countries. And we expect this Clarin ERIC to be able to start on the 1st of January 2012. Actually, at this moment, we have submitted an application to the European Commission to set up the ERIC for Clarin. And, well, the first screening was by the Commission very positive, and now the people at the Commission are now sending this application through all the Commission services, probably a legal service, financial service, or whatever services, in order to check whether this application is really a valid ERIC application. And we hope that if all goes well, the creation of the ERIC will be published in the official journal sometime before Christmas. And then after 3 days, we will exist. And initially, not all the countries will be involved in the ERIC because, as you can imagine, if governments have to agree to becoming part of a consortium, they take their time. And some of them need more time than others. And I think, well, some of the countries were very fast. You know, the Netherlands, because they're going to host this Clarin, so for them there was a reason to be very fast. Germany, Austria, Denmark, Croatia, I'm just mentioning a few, the Czech Republic, I must be forgetting a few. They were very, very eager to join the Clarin ERIC, and so they are part of this consortium. I think we will start with maybe 8 or 10, but I'm sure the others will join. And well, of course, there are always a few problematic countries. As you can imagine, Italy is always a problem case. But at this moment, I must say that at the very bottom of the ladder, we find a country the name of which I will not reveal here, because it will be rude towards our host to tell you which country this is. That's our most problematic case. Okay, but we are very optimistic. This Clarin ERIC will be up and running in January. Now, just to summarize the shape of Clarin, we see this is Clarin. here you see the orange or brownish boxes are the activities in the various countries. Every member country does things, and the part of it is infrastructure type operation, part of it is creation of knowledge and data and tools. So, and then we have the Clarion Eric as a, let's say, a body that's on top of that, and then you have the yellow layer, that's where all the interconnections are made, that's the infrastructure layer, and that is coordinated by Clarion Eric, so that everything fits together. So that's the role of Clarion Eric. So Clarion Eric will not interfere in the, let's say, in the rest of the brown boxes, because that's up to the countries. Now you may ask why I've explained all this to you, because most people are not interested in, let's say, all these governance things, because that's boring, that's not science. But I think it's important that we all realize what sort of animal Clarion is and will be, because it's a different sort of thing from what we are used to, and I think that's important for all of us to realize. Now, some essential ingredients that we should not forget. Well, standards, I think standards are at the heart of our the collaboration between all the centers. Standards and standards to make things work together. Standards both for representation of data, for annotation, for metadata, because without that it's not going to work. And that's a very delicate exercise, because we all have our own standards. We all know that our own standard is the best, and how to make sure that we can still work together. So, and of course, Clarion will never ever try to impose one new Clarion standard on everybody, because that would be silly and crazy and not productive. The idea of Clarion is that we hope to agree with participating countries that we will support a limited number, let's say a handful, maybe 2 handfuls of standards very actively, and that we ensure that there is mappability between them, that they can be mapped onto each other without major effort. And so that's the way we see we can play the game. And of course, the standards that we want to support are the standards, not in some cases maybe formal standards, but very often it's de facto standards, because many communities are using their own de facto standards, and there's no reason for Clarion to say, well, from now on you're going to do something differently, because if they work, we should exploit that. And now the centers have to offer services, and they have to be stable and reliable. Like now these days, if you want to make use of university services, sometimes they say, well, sorry, during the academic holidays we are closed because the main people are traveling. Of course, that should not be possible in the future, because if you're offering Clarion services, you should really provide 24-hour services, 7 hours, 24-hour services 7 days per week. Now, in every country, we expect there to be at least one center, but of course, and now the blue bit starts, we want to ensure to access to all relevant resources in participating countries. And we all know that libraries are sitting on very interesting resources, and they, at this moment, they are not, in most countries, they are not really part of the Clarion community, and this is a problem. In addition to the service centers, we want to have a centers of competence, virtual centers of competence, or physical ones, we don't care, in a variety of fields. And I think that from this point of view, Impact's OCR center is a very interesting thing that's going to happen, because that's exactly the sort of service centers we want to have all around in Europe, where you really concentrate the knowledge in a specific area to serve our user communities. So, and here, so the blue bits are the bits where I think our paths are very clearly crossing, because there we both have an interest. We want to have, to ensure access for our community to the library the material, and we also want to have this competence in OCR, because OCR is not just important for libraries, but for any archive that contains paper material. So this is very important. If you now look at the universe of typical Clarion centers, then you see that we see lots of universities, and who share both data collections from research projects and tools. We see national academies of sciences, we see national language institutions, we see other research institutions that own language resources and tools. And if you look at the nature of these materials, the large majority of them is written material. And so what's missing is, first of all, in this whole game, commercial parties, which is not surprising given the target audience and the way we are going to set up the Clarion as an ERIC. But I do think there's room for commercial players, but that's something we have to figure out once we are up and running, because it's a bit complex. We want to have better coverage of other modalities than just written text. We want to have national or other public archives involved, and we want to have far more libraries, because at this moment we have just a handful of libraries that are actively involved in a few countries. Now, why are the libraries not involved? Basically, I think that's not really a choice by us. So Clarion was very much a bottom-up initiative from the natural language processing community. And there's also enormous difference we've noticed in the digital cultures. When we started talking to libraries some 5 years ago, when we were preparing the whole Clarion concept, the libraries we talked to had no interest whatsoever in joining Clarion, because they said, no, we are taking care of our own digital operations. We are going to create nice PDFs, and we make it available, so we've nothing, there's no interconnection, and we can take care of ourselves. I think that's changing now. And well, there are also a few exceptions. I know that in some countries, like in the Netherlands, in Denmark, and we heard an example yesterday about Finland, where the libraries actively participate in the national Clarion consortium. And if you realize that, we heard the figure yesterday, that the libraries are sitting on 5 centuries of printed material, 100 million books, it's quite clear that this material is indispensable for many humanities, social sciences scholars. So we cannot afford to leave that out of our scope, because scholars should have access to everything, and not just to the images, but also to the content and to the services that they can use to manipulate or exploit and explore the data. Now, Clarion libraries, what do I see as obstacles? Well, there was this traditional cultural gap. I think that we should change that. I think that the libraries and Clarion should talk to each other very seriously. And I think I've reason to be optimistic. First of all, it's quite clear from lots of initiatives, and also from, let's say, the libraries' participation in this project, that libraries have really started reflecting on their own future role in the digital age. I mean, they cannot just stick to paper books alone. So they're probably open to, let's say, teaming up with other parties. And I also think that the fact that we have an ERIC structure might be helpful here, because if you look at the participants in the ERIC, that's government through ministries, and in many cases, the ministries that are funding Clarion are the same ministries that are funding the national libraries and other libraries. So there might be some interesting platform for the two communities to sit together and to discuss a common future. Another big problem, and I think in the case of libraries even worse than in the case of the rest of the Clarion data, it's intellectual property rights. If you think about books and that sort of things, and that's not a problem that Clarion or the libraries can solve, but it's something that has to be addressed at the level of legislation. And I think it's time the governments and the European Commission take initiatives there, because I think that's entirely in their hands and not in ours. For any collaboration between these parties to work, it's absolutely essential that we discuss common sets of standards that we can use. So we really need set up some forum for discussion between the two communities. There is, of course, the sheer volume of material, because I think that there is so much material available, so there are so many books, and I think there's no funding, especially in these times of crisis, available to digitize and OCR all the books that are in the world. So I think that where in the past you saw lots of digitization projects just for the sake of digitization, the culture is changing, because now you see it at the national level. The Research Council said, no, we are only going to fund that type of project if they are part of a bigger endeavor, let's say a national research program. If you need specific digital resources for your research program, we are prepared to fund your digitization, otherwise we are not interested. So here we should really think in terms of phasing of this operation and based on research priorities. And there is another very big gap that was there, was the OCR gap. And especially for, well, as you all know, you know better than I do, for historical documents. And I think that, well, this being here at this event has really shown me that enormous progress has been made here, and that there's real possibility to assume that in a few years' time the OCR gap will be bridged, so that we have very usable and interesting facilities to do the OCR. And in addition, we will have a European Center of Expertise or Competence in OCR. That's the one initiated by Impact, which I think is a wonderful thing. Now, my last slide to conclude. Now, I hope that by now you understand why I'm so happy here. But my mission for today was to, first of all, to explain to those who didn't know what Clarion was about, to explain why we feel that Clarion cannot succeed if we do not collaborate with the libraries, and to explain how extremely pleased we are with the Impact project because of its, its contribution to the OCR technology and because of the Center of Expertise. And I hope that this meeting, after this meeting, we'll be able to set up a lasting collaboration between, on one hand, Clarion, on the other hand, the communities represented by the Impact project. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this inspiring and also entertaining presentation. And this also built an excellent bridge to the next session, which is about launching the Impact Competence Center, because I'm sure that there will be plenty of opportunities for collaboration between what Clarion is going to set up and what Impact will set up. I think there's room for one question.
I don't have a question, but I have an addition. Since I know the Clarion Center, all language work and language tools and lexica have been developed to Clarion compliance standards. Even the retrieval application is currently getting a top layer Clarion compliant for Clarion search and develop. So without you knowing, there's some interconnection going on already between Impact and Clarion without even planning it. But because of what we think is important as a language institute for further working together. So I wanted to add that.
Well, thank you. Well, you are setting an excellent example, and I hope that other countries will follow, because this is exactly the way we hope things will happen.